we go. All right, welcome to another movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for movieswithmark.com, filminquiry.com, and twincities.geek.com. So I'm just going to blast through about three quick films. I know it's been a while since I did the last stream, so we're just going to catch up on a few films, one coming out this weekend, one that's been out the following weekend, and I think one that just came out like 3 weeks ago. It's been a while, so let's get straight into it. Let's get the titles up here. Let's see. We'll start, of course, with the latest film out this weekend, The Amateur. Let me get my notes up here. And let's see, I'm going to minimize that window a little. There we go. Okay, got the notes right on the side here. All right. There, I've been changing layouts, so this might be a better one. All right. Let's get into The Amateur. In 3, 2, 1. So, The Amateur is a spy thriller in which Rami Malek plays a very intelligent CIA, someone who wants to be at CIA on a revenge path. Now, I think, this is the film that I kind of want to champion because I love the fact that Malek's character of Charlie, who more or less works within the CIA as more of an intelligence guy than an action guy. He kind of becomes the unlikely hero in this type of film because basically he plays his character whose wife dies and he wants revenge on the people who did it, and he believes that the CIA isn't going to help him and that he's just going to have to go on the run and just ends up going on this revenge quest. So initially I like the idea of this, having Malek playing a character who's not really an action hero and has to use more of his brain more than his brawn, and I kind of like that aspect of the film, especially since this character realizes he's not that capable of either killing or even holding and pulling the trigger of a gun. So I kind of like the idea of having that typical type of spy thriller, but have it with a more intelligent character instead of just instead of just having it with some big muscle-bound action hero where we've seen in a bunch of films. So I think the film has a good angle going for it with that, but unfortunately the big problem with The Amateur is that it does fall back on a lot of typical spy thriller tropes and moments, like the whole angle of having his wife, played by Rachel Brosnahan, when she dies, she reappears throughout the film in kind of a ghostly form, which is not new for these type of revenge thrillers to hallucinate, your dead spouse. There are some decent emotional moments from when Charlie, Malek's character, realizes that his wife's dead. He does have some fairly good emotional moments there, but I feel like this film, it fluctuates between, having this very, having a little bit more of an intelligent vibe for how it plays up this type of character. But on the other angle, it just, like I said, it just falls into the typical tropes. It has the dead wife, visions coming back, the dialogue in between scenes, and setting up exposition is not that great. A lot of characters just kind of give a little bit off performances here. Malek's character I can understand, but it's so many of these other characters here, like Lawrence Fishburne, who's playing more or less a mentor who tries to teach Malek all about tries to teach him that if you kill somebody you can't undo it. But unfortunately, this is a speech that I've heard in other action thrillers many times, and Fishburne just kind of goes through the motions there, even though he has a pretty decent fight scene in this film. There are also other characters that he'll befriend along the way who kind of help him out, and some of them are morally ambiguous. They're hesitant to help him, and some might turn on him, and some might offer him help that he might refuse, and some will just end up dead as they keep going along here. So yeah, it's a lot of familiar staging for this type of a spy thriller, typical globetrotting stuff, some decently shot chase moments for intensity, and a few fight scenes here and there. But I wish it didn't, because where this film works best is when it makes this character of Charlie more of an interesting killer. When he targets the various members of this terrorist group that were responsible for killing his wife. He, I liked how he used like pollen at one point to take advantage of someone's allergies to kind of like, give them a fighting chance before he might kill them. There's also probably one of the best moments in the film is when, it basically, threatens this guy by launching him off a roof in this like glass pool where he uses like water pressure just to kill this guy, which I found like fascinating. It's like, okay, I'm kind of digging on this. Here's this guy who doesn't think he can kill, and he's using all like his tactile smarts here to try to get his way up to like the person who was responsible for killing his wife. And I do like that angle as well, like having him, contemplate like revenge and death as he goes along. I admired that about the film, but unfortunately, it falls like back on all these like typical platitudes. Like, there's hardly any room for Charlie in this film, where it just feels like he's just delivering, like the most. He's just delivering like the most like basic lines for what he's meant to feel here, that I don't think it gives his character, like, I don't think it gives much of any character for anyone within this film. That's very tightly packed with a lot of familiar elements and some a little bit of subversion here. Not enough, though, I think, to sustain it, because like I said, I like the idea of having this very smart guy go on like the spy thriller instead of, a muscle-bound action hero. But unfortunately, the film just never achieves takeoff speed with that. Like, it keeps building up. I start getting interested, and then it just kind of like plateaus the more that it keeps going, and then it goes down with my interest in like the acting and some of the writing here, especially since like there's a lot of like wheel turning moments here where it just feels like the CIA training that Charlie gets is like so brief in the film that it's weird, like how quickly everything happens here. And to a degree, like, I kind of dig it. They do set up some pretty neat stuff for Charlie to do, but as the film goes along, there are a lot of like just like left field surprises, and I can't help but feel like that's almost to like make up for the fact that there are a lot of components of this film that don't work. Like, there's not as much personality, like there's not enough of like a leaning in to the smarts of this character, or even like his turmoil for his wife. Like, it's mostly just reserved for these hallucinations, which just, they get the point across decently. But it never really feels like you're bearing the full weight, the big, both like emotional and like the philosophical weight that this character should be having, that it just kind of feels like he's going through the motions when it really shouldn't, because there are some pretty cool chase scenes here. Like, I love the big pool death that happens, and Malek's performance here is fine, especially for like a character who seems like very like lasered in on like his goals. Like, it kind of like reminded me like a little bit of The Accountant, which we have another sequel to that film coming up, but yeah, like I kept wanting this film to be a little bit more, because like it's not a bad action thriller, but like you can see the potential there for more. You can see like you can just add just like a little bit more humanity, a few more smarts to a lot of the chases and the traps here, and then you'd have like a really cool spy thriller that's able to like rise above like the usual types of films in this genre. And unfortunately, it comes so close, and I want to like champion the film on having that kind of like brain versus brawn thing and being a little bit different than other spy thrillers, but it only ends up being just a little bit like an extra coat of paint on the same type of vehicle that it's been before. So I was rooting for The Amateur. I really do. I wanted to have that kind of like underdog spy thriller, but it's still bound by a lot of the limitations here. So not quite a negative recommendation. Just it needs a little something more. Like, I think if you love like action spy thrillers in any form, and you don't care how repetitive they are, you'll probably be entertained by this. But if you've seen all of them, if you want something a little bit different, you're going to be a little bit disappointed by how this film just kind of falls back on the typical tropes and doesn't really do much new with them, despite how much like kind of fertile ground it could explore here. So yeah, the Amateur ended up being a little bit disappointing. So The Amateur is currently playing in theaters right now. I'll read from the chat here once I get the credits off here. Hey Mark, hope you had fun at Anime Detour like I did. I definitely did. Really enjoyed your panels and Tonze. And it had and had to say sorry. I see it there. And yeah, thanks for the autographs. It's fine. I mean I've gotten used to doing that with do my autograph with like books, but like sometimes at conventions, actually even at this convention, someone came up and said like, "Could you sign my badge?" It's like, okay. I've signed weirder stuff. Like I think when I was doing panels with like John Paul way back when, we used to like talk up Mad Bull 34 all the time in our panels, and then. And then someone came up with a DVD copy of Mad Bull 34 and say, "Would you sign it?" It's like, okay, we didn't do anything other than tell you about it. But yeah, it's a little less weird with books. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. Are you typing on the phone? Okay, yeah. No, I get it. All right. It's a little bit tongue-tied there. I don't know why. These are not even like that complex films. They're just typical. All right. A little bit of slurring of the words there, but I think I might edit that one down a little bit. All right. Go with the next film, an A24 film. Death of a Unicorn. All right, here we go in 3, 2, 1. So Death of a Unicorn is a horror comedy that it's pretty much as advertised. It's about a dead unicorn, and the unicorn ends up coming back to life, and just carnage ensues. It's just it's very much what it implies. It's a horror film or a creature feature, if you will, where the creature is a unicorn, and the unicorn ends up killing a bunch of people. In particular, in this film, the unicorn kills a bunch of rich people. So yeah, it's definitely it's one of those eat the rich films, but with a unicorn in it, and I think like that's the best and the worst way to describe it, because if that's all you're looking for, if you're just looking for like these magical unicorns that go on this like killer spree of all these rich people and use their horns to like rip them all apart, yeah, the film does deliver on that angle. But I think in terms of delivering on something a little bit more, which, it does set up a little bit with these characters, it does fall a bit short. I think there's like enough weirdness and quirkiness to like these characters to make it enduring enough where I thought most of it worked, like for the most part. I will say like it is easy to root for the two characters that we end up loving here, which is Paul Rudd playing Elliot and Jenna Ortega playing Ridley of the Kittner family. They're easy to root for. They just lost the matriarch of their family, and they're debating whether or not to take on this big deal, and they have disagreements about the environment and whether money holds rule over our life. And while they're having this argument on the way to this rich guy's little place to discuss a business deal, they hit a unicorn, and they're at first like frightened, like what's going on here, and then as they realize, if they touch the unicorn, they can apparently see the universe, and if they get some of the unicorn's blood on them, it can apparently cure stuff like acne and just everything. Basically, yeah, the unicorn blood is magical and has healing properties. So when they end up driving to this rich person's estate, the rich guy here played by Richard E. Grant, which I do admire how they kind of use Richard E. Grant. Like, I think they set him up to be like this kind of, old guy who can barely move and like can barely speak, and then of course like later on in the film he does end up becoming the Richard E. Grant that a lot of us are more used to in his more eccentric type of roles, like like How to Get Ahead in Advertising and stuff like that. The other members of the family, they're pretty easy to define. You end up kind of liking Anthony Carrigan's character as the butler. He's very dry humor with him, but also you have Will Porter, who's basically playing this this stock trading guy who's so far up his own ass, and he wants to drink and he wants to do drugs. So of course, when a unicorn arrives at his door, his first question is, "Oh, can we snort the horn?" And he does, in case you're wondering. Taylor Leona as Belinda, the wife here. She's pretty, typical rich woman who likes to think highly of herself. All these characters are kind of like are pretty much like cartoon characters, like even including like the scientists who are investigating the unicorn, played by Sunita Mani and Steve Park. They're all just pretty much fit into like the typical roles for like a B movie here. And yeah, like, and that's about it at that point as far as character goes. Like, there's a little bit of an arc between Rudd and Ortega in this film where, you know, they kind of, the father and daughter learn to see eye to eye. So it's a decent build. It gives you enough to root for instead of just having everyone in the building being, you know, pierced and destroyed by these unicorns very brutal ways, which is, I will admit, it is fun to watch, you know, a unicorn's horn rip someone's body apart or go up their face or decapitate them or just, you know, stomp on heads. Pretty much every death you could think of with a unicorn, most of it's in here, most of it. And I do appreciate that it's a little bit more creative than just using the horn to stab everything. Like they do some stomping and some biting here and there, which is pretty clever. Not exceptionally clever. Like I think there's more wild stuff you can do since the unicorns are magical. But I do kind of like the idea at first, like when the dead unicorn arrives, Richard E. Grant of course is like, well, you know, if the unicorn's blood can heal stuff, why don't we try to see if we can market this? And immediately the film goes into like its, you know, its capitalist satire of having these characters quickly devise like a business way of trying to like divvy up like this unicorn and replicate its magical blood and all that. And while they're all doing this, Jenna Ortega is, you know, of course looking more into folklore and realizing, you know, she's basically like the voice of reason. Like, you know, you need to, you know, not mess with this unicorn, which does lead to some deadly results. And it is fun. It is like, I will say this. I did enjoy a lot of the lines here that the characters are given. There's a lot of funny bits of dialogue they have here. But it never, because everyone is such like a cartoon character, kind of like in their own little world within this film, there isn't much chemistry or payoff in between these characters. Because I kept noticing that as the film went along. It's like, I like these lines, they're funny lines, but they're not playing off of each other here. It just feels like, okay, here's Richard E. Grant's funny line, and here's Paul Rudd's little stumbling here, and here's like Jenna Ortega's dry wit here. And it never really builds. It just feels like we're getting to like the next beat here, especially within like the second act where it becomes, you know, just all about talking about the business of what to do with the dead unicorn, which I will say is funny for a bit. Like I think I admired more the energy of that more than anything here. Especially like as the film goes along, it becomes clear, like, you know, they're kind of coasting on the performances here to carry this film, which they kind of do. I mean, you know, Rudd is, you know, a believable type of dad here who's a little bit meek. Jenna Ortega, you know, of course, the young voice of reason, does it well. Will Porter is just such a great up his own butt type of like alcoholic that he works perfectly for this film, especially as this rich brat. Tay Leone does a pretty good job as well, and of course Richard E. Grant is just beautiful as always. Grant always makes a meal out of his performances, and he doesn't disappoint here. So I was very conflicted about this film. I think like it does have some lulls in the beats here, where it's just like, okay, I get it. You know, this rich family, they're a bunch of pricks. I get it. You know, Jenna Ortega is supposed to be the environmental voice of reason here, and I can see the wheels turning here. It's just like, can we get to like some more funnier stuff that happens? And it does come about in bits and pieces here and there. And I think in terms of like the aspects that I enjoyed, I think I enjoyed more singular moments as opposed to like scenes in general, because it's like, oh, here's like the scene where this happened and this happened, because like I said, that there isn't much of a play off of, you know, the characters don't really play much off of each other here. Like they do conflict, but only in like the very thematic ways that are like stressed within this film, where it's just like the eat the rich narrative gets like very, very blunt at times. It's just like, okay, you need to add a little bit more to this. Like there's I gotta like just a little bit more subversion here. And there are a few like unexpected jokes towards like the end of the film. I did kind of admire how it gets a little bit wilder with the characters. Especially like with Will Porter. I love what they do with him by the end of this film. But yeah, I think for those just expecting, you know, like nothing more than just a, you know, fairly typical Eat the Rich film with a fantastical element, just lots of cool like gory scenes of unicorns destroying human beings. It's not bad. It's not a like laugh riot, and I was kind of hoping it would be, just because like the whole fantastical idea. I was hoping that it would just, it would expand from that, not just, be like that repetition from Cabin in the Woods where you had that unicorn stabbing somebody, which is a funny bit for like, 10 seconds. But you need a little bit more than that for a film here. And I think there's just enough to make it a fun film. I think very much like a fun, mindless film. Like there are some interesting aspects, I think, of like how it, tackles a little bit of like the satire and some weirdness to like the fantastical elements, like especially the trippy visions of the unicorns. But it never quite felt like it was going much further than just being like smirk-worthy and a few chuckles here and there. Because I don't know too much what I was expecting from a film like Death of a Unicorn, but it did have its moments of charm, and I loved it. I think the cast is the best thing that works in this film, and they do carry it through, as long as you're willing to just see them kind of in their own little bubbles here, just trying to find a place within this narrative. So yeah, it's not a bad film. I had a few decent laughs with it, and for as much as I felt like it wasn't, doing anything different with this besides, just having like a kind of like a blockbuster style B movie, I guess. It comes close to being that, but I think, B movies do rely on a little bit more camp than this. So it's just like, it comes as advertised. Death of a Unicorn, it's a fun film, but it could be better. It's just like, there's more smiles and chuckles than there are like big laughs within this type of movie. So Death of a Unicorn, I think, is still playing here and there. Not Hudson Hawk, Richard E. Grant. No. Not quite that. Not quite that type of Richard E. Grant. But yes, he does get up and start moving around, and it starts like chewing scenery. Gets all excited. Because that's what you want out of that type of film. I mean, that's what you want out of Richard E. Grant. Like, that's when he's at his top form, Okay, we got one more film here. Let me get up my notes here. All right. Working Man, the latest Jason Statham. All right. Here we go in 3, 2, 1. So, A Working Man stars Jason Statham, and it's directed by David Ayer. And of course, when I saw the trailer, I'm sure like a lot of people had the same question. Like, wait a minute, is this a sequel to The Beekeeper? The film from last year with Jason Statham that was also directed by David Ayer? In which a working class guy just tries to like stand up to like some bad guys and gun them down. And part of me wants to believe that it was. I mean, as I looked into this film, I realized, I didn't know this. It's based on a novel by Chuck Dixon. And not to mention, like, it was written by Sylvester Stallone, not directed by him, just co-written with David Ayer. But part of me wants to believe that this was just that Ayer just made up this film on the fly right after finishing The Beekeeper. Like, he got done with making The Beekeeper, and it's like, I gotta come up with like a new film for Jason Statham really quick, and just like worked up like A Working Man like over a weekend, just like scribbled it down and just like bam, we're done. We got another Jason Statham film. It's basically The Beekeeper, but I scribbled out stuff here and there. And I also like told Jason Statham, no, it's not The Beekeeper 2. It's you're a man who works. He's a working man. And honestly, I kind of wish that it were a sequel to The Beekeeper, because I really dug The Beekeeper. Like, it's dumb, but it knows where to have fun, and it knows where to like lean into the exaggeration and the grit of the scenario. Because A Working Man feels it comes so close to being like a great so bad it's funny comedy. Just because like I feel like it's so brazen with like the type of film it's trying to be here, because of course even if you've never seen the trailers, like, Jason Statham, even though he puts up this facade of just being a construction worker, he's really got a history of violence. Like, that just from looking at him, his character here called Levon Cade, he's established as a construction worker. And then, of course, when some gangsters come by and they threaten, like, one of his workers, he comes up there and he says, like, hey, leave him alone. And they say, like, hey, mind your own business. And then the camera zooms in on Statham as, like, the angry music swells. And it's just like, I wish the film were that ridiculous of just like leaning into like the tropes that we expect of this type of film. But it like I said, there are those little fun moments because like once that happens, of course, Statham uses his action skills to kind of use stuff around the construction site to beat up these gangsters. And it's like, that's silly. Like, and I want more of that. But unfortunately, the film, I think, falls back a little bit too much on like the familiar stuff we expect Statham to do in this type of role, because the whole idea behind this film is that he needs to rescue his boss's daughter, who's been taken in by the Russian mafia. And he basically, just all he wants to do is just get back this girl, and, he's basically makes it his life mission. But he also has some lingering elements of PTSD, and he's trying to fight for custody of his daughter, and none of that's working out. So he figures that if he can just rescue this one girl, that everything else in his life is just gonna get better, or at least, be better for him, if he can rescue this girl. Now, of course, Statham goes through like all the familiar motions here. He hunts down these mafia guys. He makes like some sly one-liners here and there, and he beats up a lot of people and some very odd people. Like there are some genuinely funny moments, I think, with like the type of characters he encounters here, especially with all the Russians being so easy for Statham to just like torture and outwit and outgun all the time, that it's kind of funny just to watch him kind of like mow down through these characters without much effort. But I love how at one point in the film, he has to confront another gang at this biker bar. And their leader sits on this giant throne of it looks like the Game of Thrones deal with like the swords, except instead of swords, it's motorcycle parts. And it made me realize, like, either this is like a rejected Game of Thrones throne, or this is a leftover from Stallone's The Expendables, like it's like promotional material, which it would not surprise me if it was, since Stallone co-wrote this film. So there isn't much more to the plot than that. It's just Statham going on a killing spree of all these different like Russian mafia members, with some moments that are kind of funny and some moments that are kind of gritty, but it never... I hate this film for never leaning that far into either being like a serious type of like revenge thriller, or just being a goofy B-movie revenge thriller, because it feels like it's trying to be both and ends up being nothing, especially with like a lot of like the wasted potential here. Like, you have David Harbour in this film who plays Levon's like best friend from like his old Marine days, and he mostly just hangs out in a cabin wearing his little wraparound shades with his giant beard and offering up guns when need be. And I'm pretty sure Harbour spends most of this film just in his scenes just sitting down. He doesn't really do anything. Like, if you were hoping for Harbour to fire some guns in this film, you're not going to get it. I think I should warn anyone going into the film expecting that. But just like such a wasted potential with just like how ridiculous like you can make like some of the like these villains here. Like, they're incompetent, sure, and they have like their funny moments, but they always kind of like dip in and out of the film. It's just like, okay, this line delivery will be a little bit silly, but this one won't. Like, it's trying to be, it feels like the film's trying to be like both silly and serious at the same time, and it ends up just kind of not really finding a flow for anything. So at one point in the film, it just gives up. Like, you're just watching Jason Statham action scenes without any like emotional build here, and with like some weird attempts at jokes here and there that kind of work, but kind of don't. Like, they're on the cusp of just being absurd and ridiculous enough. And I think that's what made me hate the film more. It's like, if you're going to do this absurd type of film, you need to lean into it harder. You need to make more ridiculous stuff. You need to play up how silly it is. And there, like I said, there are a few moments that do come closer. I mean, like, there's a little bit more of that magic within Ayer's directing that kind of carried over from The Beekeeper. But it feels like wasted potential all over the place here. Like, consider this. This is a film in which one woman who's being held captive by these Russian mafia goons, she's presented to this man, and she immediately bites on his face and tears off the skin, and like, he has to get like stitches, and he's bleeding from the face, like, that sounds really cool, doesn't it? Here's the thing. The film has this, but you don't get to see her bite down on the flesh. You don't get to see you would think if this film had a scene like that, where a woman bites off someone's face, you would want to see that, especially in a gritty, silly film like this one. But you don't get that in a Working Man. That's how much of a cheat a Working Man is. If you're just going into this film expecting some very cool violence for like this revenge fantasy type of film, you don't get as much of that as you should here. You get a little bit of it here and there based on how Statham kills his targets and how he's like just laser focused on just getting this girl out of there. You do get the violence, but not enough. There isn't that same, weird energy that was in The Beekeeper. And it's just, like I said, it pales in comparison. And it's hard not to compare the two because, like, they came out just like a year apart, and it's the same actor and the same director, co-writer here. And it's just, it's never working as much as it should. And, like, I know that they probably went into production with this as they were finishing up with Beekeeper, but it's just, there has to be something more to it than that. Like, if you're going to be silly, be silly. Lean hard into that camp. You just can't half-ass it in a film like this, especially, if you want it to be more enduring and not just like bleed into all the other Jason Statham action films. Like, this will probably get lost alongside, something like The Mechanic or any of like his other type of films, because it's just, it's so close. It is so close. It's maddening to being so bad that it's funny. It has its moments like okay, this is ridiculous. I smirked a little here and there, but not enough, I think, to enjoy this film. And honestly, after I was done watching this movie, I went back and watched The Beekeeper just to remind myself of how much, campy fun that David Ayer could have with using Jason Statham. Because David Ayer did it fine last year with The Beekeeper, but with The Working Man, he just doesn't deliver on this film that is never quite serious or silly enough to be that entertaining. So Working Man, I think, is still playing in theaters. I don't think it did too well. Co-written by Stallone, yeah. Which was surprising. That's why I thought The Expendables, because the whole motorcycle deal he had. I had to imagine there had to have been something within his with it. I don't know. Maybe that's just like a little Easter egg that he put in there for people who really love The Expendables enough to follow it. It's odd. All right, let me take a little drink here before the sign off. Okay. So let's all right. Let's do a quick review and go over the reviews I did today. I reviewed The Amateur, currently out in theaters. Spy thriller with a more intelligent character than an action-bound character. It does have some interesting ideas and some smarts, but not enough to pull it out of being a routine action spy thriller when it really shouldn't be. I also reviewed Death of a Unicorn, a film in which a unicorn murderizes, if that were a word, brutalizes, I think would be a better word, brutalizes a rich family. It's basically an Eat the Rich type of film with a fantastical edge. It does have its moments of charm here and there. Pretty fun film, enough to carry it across the finish line, but not as great as it could have been. And finally, I reviewed A Working Man, the latest Jason Statham film, directed by David Ayer. Feels like a sequel to The Beekeeper for being so similar, and it does have some fun here and there, but not enough to sustain itself or make for that much of an interesting film that can't decide if it's trying to be silly or serious. So that is probably my least liked film of the week. And I would say among all those three, if you would have to go see one, I would say go see Death of a Unicorn. Like I said, not that great, but still a decent amount of fun here if you're willing to go with like the cartoonish characters they have in that film. And a close second would be The Amateur. I'd say if you really, really do love action spy thrillers and you don't mind a few of like the typical tropes and hallmarks, just dusted off again with like a little bit of subversion sprinkled on top, The Amateur isn't bad. It's a fine spy thriller. It's just it doesn't have as much personality or as humanity as it could have had. So if you want reviews on all three movies, they are currently on movieswithmark.com. If you would like to see, if you'd like to see more early movie reviews, these weren't early here, unless you haven't seen The Amateur yet. It's came out this weekend. Death of a Unicorn and Working Man have been out for about a week or so. But if you want early reviews, which I do a lot more of in the fall, be sure to like and subscribe to this video so that you can keep up to date on the latest movies. And if you want to support my books currently, I am writing about banned movies over on Patreon. So you can check that out there and sign up to get that book once it is finished. So, what do we have coming up here? Thank you so much. Thanks for stopping by, and thanks for stopping by at Anime Detour. It's good to see you there. So what do we got coming up? We got The Accountant 2. I do want to cover that for various reasons. Mostly because like I was a bit entertained by the Accountant. It's not a great film. Like it goes freaking stupid by the third act. But part of me admires like how much it keeps up that facade for a while. And then just kind of leans more to like thriller silliness by the end. So yeah, I'm curious to see what happens to that film. I'm also going to see if I can cover, what else was I going to cover? I'm going to see if I can end up getting a screener for Friendship, which should be coming up in May. Obviously Thunderbolts will probably be getting a screener for that one. There was one that I know I'll definitely be able to review next time. It's I just got the screener for it. It's called a Wedding Banquet. Stars a few big Asian actors, so I'm looking forward to cover that. And I guess I'll go more into TV here because I have actually, I don't know how much, if I can talk much about it here, but Andor season 2 is coming up, and I've watched all the episodes of it with early screener, like all of them. So I do want to talk about that show just because I loved the first season of Andor, and there's a whole lot that I want to end up saying with season 2. There's a lot I have to say about on season 2. Not just like the plot reveals and stuff, but just like the general fascist revolution parallels that I think are worth discussing. But yeah, that my review should be coming out in about a week or so when the embargo drops, about a day or two before it. I'll let you know when it comes up. But yeah, I do have a lot to talk about with that. But yeah, we've got a lot coming up in the next 2 weeks or so. Like I said, we have more A24 films like Friendship. We have another Marvel film, Thunderbolts, and we have The Accountant 2. If you like more wild spy thrillers about highly intelligent killers, so looking forward to that. Let's see. Scorn says I haven't heard good things about Hell of a Summer, but I'm looking forward to new Nick Cage movie, The Surfer. I mean, Nick Cage is always working. That makes me happy. Like I my expectations fluctuate with Nick Cage films, but I always look forward to him. Like even what was that film he did 2 years ago called was it Dream? Oh, Dream Scenario. The one where he plays Dudu Pierce in everyone's dreams. It's not a bad film. It's fine. I will say this though, the funny, since you brought up Nick Cage, the funniest thing that I have sitting around here is my Nick Cage sleeping mask, which they gave out with Dream Scenario to make it look like him. So I had 2 of these and I gave away one as a gift just to someone, because I don't know, like how often do you have like Nick Cage promotional merch that's just him? I gotta say, I love when studios do that, when they just have like one simplistic thing that they advertise. Like I have a shirt that I love wearing from Todd Haynes' film May September, It was no, sorry, May December. But the front of the shirt, I think they might have got it backwards because the front of the shirt just says a film by Todd Haynes, and on the back it advertises May December, which I love the fact that it's just on the front because then it feels like you're wearing a credit the whole time. So yeah, that's one of my favorite new bits of. I think I got rid of most of the. I'm just looking around all the studio merch that I end up getting. I think I end up destroying the. Obviously, I destroyed all like the screener copies, so those are all gone. But I've got. I think I got like some like there. I think. Yeah, I think they have like a. Actually, I think I have it up there. There's a record I think I have of Maestro, which this is kind of odd. Oh, this is even odder. This is how often I clean up this stuff in here. I got like the pearl mask that they gave us. Here we go. So yeah, they ended up giving me like a record of Maestro, which I think is just like just most of Leonard Bernstein's music on here. It's pretty good ones too. It's not bad. Yeah, it's just the full soundtrack here on a rather nice record. So yeah. There's all the other wild stuff. And if you want to see more wild stuff like that, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see what other junk I can pull out from my TARDIS below my legs here. So, God, that sounded wrong. I gotta stop. Okay, like and subscribe if you want to see more movie reviews, or go over to patreon.com if you want to support my books. And I do have more video essays coming up. The Agretzko one I know is kind of basic, but I wanted to try to kind of get around copyright and do something clever, and I've been sitting on that audio for a while. I've got a big, in fact, I've actually got one of my scripts here for like a big video essay I've got coming up, so I'm going to try to get to that when I can. So, all right, I'll see you in about 2 weeks or so when we get closer to summer. We're going to have the big summer films, and of course we got a big Marvel film coming up, so I'll see you there. Later. Oh, kiss.